I hope everybody, after their generous portions of delicious lunch here in Mexico City, has enough alertness to engage in soft power. But I promise you, we are going to have an exciting panel. My name is Stuart Holliday. I'm the President and CEO of Meridian International Center, which is an organization that brings leaders together from across the world to collaborate on solutions to global challenges through diplomacy, leadership, and culture. And I was looking at the biographies of my panel, and I thought if there was a survivor game of who had the best panel at this conference, I'm confident that we would win. We have a national champion Duke basketball player, a three-time James Beard award-winning documentary producer and policy analyst. We have an incredible young and dynamic leader from Canada who is one of the 25 most influential women, as well as has been decorated by the Queen of England. And we have a governor who improved the quality of life in his state, continues to do so, and took his city, Merida. He was mayor and was voted by Forbes magazine as one of the best places to live and work. And last but not least, we have the person who's in charge of all of foreign policy for North America. So you can't beat that lineup. But we're here to talk about what is called soft power. I'm not sure that's the right word for it anymore, but what we're really talking about is the ability of new sectors and actors to create diplomatic channels and social change around the world. Our embassies can't do it by themselves. They are terrific at what they do. The State Department does a fantastic job in promoting exchanges, whether it's the Fulbright program or the International Visitor Leadership Program. But we need business leaders, we need artists, we need scientists, the whole pantheon of people that are necessary to help connect us, because we're dealing with so many challenges. And I wanted to kick it off with the Deputy Assistant Secretary. Rachel, I wanted to ask you, as somebody that has been around the issues in this hemisphere, it's frequently the case in foreign policy that the short term overtakes the long term investment in building relationships with people. But I was wondering, there's obviously the crisis of the day, but then there's the importance of building enduring relationships through exchanges and public diplomacy. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what you do there at the State Department.
You bet. I'm happy to do it, and I'm just really so thrilled to be on this panel today. It's such an amazing lineup, and I'm kind of starstruck by the folks that I get to sit up here with for the next hour. As you said, Ambassador, I think one of the most important things about education and cultural exchanges is how foundational they are in terms of making change. We can do a lot of work, government to government, and we absolutely have to do that work. But the ability to make a connection and to really understand each other's culture, and that's what you get through an educational or cultural exchange, has a lasting impact. And I know firsthand, because the place where I studied abroad was Mexico when I was in my 20s. And had it not been for the Instituto Cultural de Oaxaca, I would never have known how to make sopa de flor de calabaza. I would have never known about the incredible contributions that Oaxaca makes to Mexico, the black pottery, all of the things that I got to experience. And that helps me frame how I do my work. I have family connections to Canada. I am Cajun. And so for me, there are strong cultural connections with both Mexico, but also with Canada, that really help frame how I do my job day in and day out and how I approach policy. And I think for any person, no matter what sector you're in, the ability to make those connections and really to understand what it means to be in another country and how to live in another country can have a lasting impression. So we do a lot of this at the Department of State. I'm pretty passionate about it because it is just so critical to essentially setting the base for diplomacy. Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of alumni, including Candace, of our exchange programs who go on to be cabinet members, governors, heads of state. And it's a wonderful investment that has longstanding, I think, benefits. So thank you for your leadership. Governor, I wanted to ask you, the private sector is critical especially as governments come and go, but private investment is so critical, as well as what you've done in the tourism sector in Yucatan. You've had experience thinking about your state from an economic development standpoint. To what degree have you viewed partnerships with the private sector as a way, as an avenue to build up your community? And I also wanted to ask you, I noticed when you were mayor and governor, you engaged internationally, globally, whether it was Germany, across, dealing with sustainability issues. You looked up above the horizon and tried to learn from other places and get as much information as you can. And I was wondering if you could comment both on the private sector piece, but also on the importance at the subnational level of governors and mayors connecting with each other across borders.
Thank you, Ambassador. Hello for everyone, and we're very excited to be here with you all, you guys. And I think Yucatan is living a great moment, and the private sector has been something that it's booming in Yucatan. For example, we need to have more infrastructure to get more companies to be aware of the importance and the conditions that we have in Yucatan. And for example, we just expanded our airport with the hand of the private sector. We're just moving from being an airport to 2 million people to 4.7 million people passengers. We're growing our port. We're building also the Mayan train. That is going to be a great opportunity not only for tourism, also for cargo. And I think that this relation with the private sector in Yucatan, it's been working in a great manner. For example, in Yucatan, when we discuss our budget, we have a discussion before we put it on the Congress. We have a commission that is integrated almost for people that don't work in the government. Example, we have the CCE, that is all, or the Coparmex of Canacintra, all the chambers of commerce. And also we have some academics, and also we have some people that are really recognized in finance. So before we go to the Congress, we all make with our budget with this group of people, and all the private sector's priorities are also in our budget. And as you were telling, I've been very active, especially in the climate change. I'm right now working with ICLEI. I am the representative from Mexico and Central America. And also I have the sustainable portfolio worldwide. And we've been traveling around the world, not also knowing all the best practices for climate change, but also to promoting our states. Yucatan is right now in a great moment. I'm just going to give you some data. 2021 is the year that we get our most economic growth in our history. Also, that year is the year that we generated the more new jobs in our history. 2022 is the year with the most foreign investment in the history of the state. Also is the year that we get the most tourism in our history. And also that's the year that we have the most secure year. And I also, when I go to other places, I always say that Yucatan is the safest state in all Mexico. And people say, but come on, it's still Mexico. So our security rates are better than any city in the United States, and we're compared with countries like Switzerland, Norway, and Sweden. So that's something that makes Yucatan a great opportunity to invest. Security, also we have the infrastructure, and also we're working very hard to get our people ready for the new opportunities that nearshoring is bringing.
That's great. And I'm sure when you're attracting foreign direct investment, you're making that case on all those fronts. I'm sure FDIs are very important for Yucatan, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So, Candace, I wanted to ask you, part of the constellation of soft power is our civil society and leaders taking it upon themselves to create change where it doesn't exist already and building things. And I was wondering, if you could tell us a little bit about developing young leaders of tomorrow today. You also have an amazing program to help bring people of African descent into the diplomatic world. But I was wondering if you could relate that a little to what you learned on your exchange program, your IVLP program.
Thank you, Ambassador. And let me start off by thanking the U.S.-Mexico Foundation and, of course, Meridian International Center and the many career sponsors and supporters who have been instrumental in me getting to this place in my career journey and who continue to open me up to opportunities for learning exchange. So I had the first recognized experience with an exchange program through the International Visitors Leadership Program in 2021 that Meridian and the U.S. State Department offered. And it was a virtual experience, of course, because we were still in the clutches of COVID. And so, which, let me just pause to say, I want to redo, because I want to do the in-person portion. But really...
Rachel, do you have that down? Did you take that?
I will take that back.
Okay.
We'll take it to Lee Satterfield.
But the experience with the IVLP program really opened up my eyes to an understanding of a brand of federalism that I hadn't seen before, I hadn't experienced before. And having the chance to engage with Global Ties Detroit, Global Ties Alabama, and Global Ties Washington during that virtual experience, I started to see and understand contextually what government relations with civil society could look like. And at the time when I did my IVLP experience, I was still in the design phase of the Black Diplomats Academy. So the Academy had not yet fully launched. So you could say that my IVLP was the launch pad for the idea around what the Academy should look like and how it should really provide complementary learning for those who are aspiring diplomats. So one experience that really stood out for me during my IVLP program was that I got the opportunity to meet with the director of the NAACP Washington branch, and Dr. Hillary Shelton. And when I met with him, we had some frank conversations about the political landscape and the difference between Canada and the US. And we also talked about the political organizing power of the NAACP having influence over every decision-making process within the within the jurisdiction of the federal government, as well as state and local government. And he asked me the question, what is it like? What's the landscape like in Canada? And I said, we don't have that. I said, we're still at the place where we're still developing what civil society's role is in influencing policy and giving the policy legs that it needs to work in communities. And so for the Black Diplomats Academy and for the organization Developing Young Leaders of Tomorrow Today generally, we were looking at, okay, how do we make sure that that the experiences, the workforce development, the cultural exchange, the understanding of what it means to make policy work in communities, the Academy could deliver that. And how we delivered that was we looked at some of the key challenges, the real structural problems that exist in our world today and of course in the Canadian context. And we're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals as that multilateral policy tool that could help us solve problems in society. And from there, we introduced our program participants to the world of the United Nations through the High-Level Political Forum on the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, our anchor policy is under the International Decade for People of African Descent and the newly formed Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, where we're looking at what recognition, justice, and development really looks like, and then, of course, marrying the context of recognition, justice, and development with international learning exchange programs, experiential learning, where you have the opportunity to engage with policy and to bring that policy back to the local level.
And you're looking to connect with Mexico as well on that
Absolutely.
initiative, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You sort of personify what we're talking about. I mean, you grew up here, you've been in Dallas, you've been in Washington, you've been a policy analyst and a chef and a media producer and have a documentary. It's just absolutely amazing. But I was wondering if you could take us back to, now it's very fashionable for people to talk about culinary diplomacy. It's a thing, like sports diplomacy, which we'll get to in just a minute. But you had this idea a long time ago to use your experience to sort of showcase to Americans and Mexicans some of the amazing culture along the border. Tell us how you came up with the idea, what it means to you, what you hope to do with it going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for watching the show. Whenever I run into people that tell me, I watched the show or I've been watching for a while, I will drop my bags at the airport and give them a hug and say, thank you, thank you. So it was, of course, excruciatingly difficult to get the show off the ground. As you know, I'm from Mexico City. I was a policy analyst and moved with my husband to Texas, did a master's in Latin American studies in Georgetown, and then I worked in a think tank for a few years, and I grew increasingly frustrated because I was feeling that the policy channels and the academic channels weren't allowing me to connect. And there was this gridlock in conversation all the time. And I realized that food and culture is not only this soft power, as we're calling it, but when words can do no more, when dialogue doesn't work anymore, food comes in and it opens your minds and it lifts veils, it tears down walls, it just opens up for a different kind of conversation that goes beyond explanation. It's human, it's animal, it's emotional, it's irrational. It's shocking to me that we have rabid fans of the show that are on opposing sides of the political spectrum, of the economy spectrum, like of any possibility that you can think, they meet and watch my show, which is incredible. And when I first started, of course, nobody thought that it was possible to have a Mexican with my accent on a mainstream network. And it was very difficult.
But you can't understand Emeril Lagasse anyway, so that works.
And it's been incredible because at first, they kept telling me in networks that I had to take classes to change my accent, that Mexican was a niche cuisine and a niche culture, and it was too ethnic. Like network executives told me that. And we're here. Our 12th season just aired, went to Yucatan, had an incredible experience, and we won 3 James Beard for the best cooking and travel show on TV. We've been nominated 4 times for Emmy Awards. And yes, it took a decade, and it was incredibly difficult, but we have an incredible community.
Patty, have you had any people from other countries come up to you and say, we have a border, we have cultures that we want to showcase, we have great food, that want to model what you're doing?
Yes, very much so. And I give them all my tips. and I give them like all my lessons learned. But the thing is that, I think we Mexicans have these, we're incredibly resilient and perseverant. And it's just not easy to do this. And it's not easy. No, I mean, of course, Americans are hardworking, Canadians too. But I just think this is a Mexican quality of you get thrown on the floor and you pick up and dust yourself up and do it again and do it again and do it again. And I think that after all these years have gone by and going back and forth, Mexico, US, I'm coming full circle. I don't know if you saw or you know about my new docuseries on the US-Mexico borderlands. And that was really incredibly impactful, and I feel like the older that I get, the more that I want to do content that matters. Like, yes, we go, we went to Tequit, for example, the episode that will air this week. We went to Tequit, this incredibly magic town in the Yucatan that focuses on making guayaberas. It's a guayabera making town. It's like from a magical realism movie. And you get to meet the people and see the love of the craft, and it's kind of magical how we live in a world that's so connected, and people can now find the ingredients to make all those things. So it talks about trade. It talks about interconnectedness. It talks about diversity. It talks about inclusion. So I was telling somebody earlier, food helps us explain things without having to use words, and people understand it better. It's like what you were saying in your wedding. You had cochinita pibil. We're best friends now. You know, like food just says, food means so much. You can have somebody that you completely disagree with, but if they share with you a bowl of soup that their grandmother made, they're vulnerable when they do it. You're vulnerable when you eat it, and you connect in a deep human way that other channels, other policy channels don't allow. So when you guys have gridlock anywhere, call me, I'll come make tacos.
And it's also interesting the layers of cultures in food. I was over here grabbing a snack, which I didn't need at the restaurant, and I looked up mole, on Wikipedia, and it said it's one of the only sauces that has origins in almost every continent. It's Mexican, it's quintessentially Mexican, but it has all these different influences. It's the same in the United States. Just hearing you talk, it reminds me of the power of visual, of documentary, of film, of video, in what we're talking about here. And I think cutting across everything we're talking about, representing things in a way that people can see them, and feel a part of them is so important. Now I want to get to, I was Reggie Love for about 5 minutes because his name was right here on the sign. And I thought I'd finally achieved something that I've always wanted to be Reggie Love, and it was taken away from me, but I enjoyed it while it lasted.
I always wanted to be Ambassador Holiday, so.
But Reggie, for those of you that don't know you, and I'm sure his bio is in your materials, but what an extraordinary career as well. Traveled the world with President Obama, probably spent more time with the president than anyone else. Played for the Dallas Cowboys, was the captain of the national champion basketball team at Duke, and now is investing in Yucatan. Did you like that? The economic development? No, is investing in a variety of. He's investing in documentary film, Canadian NGOs, public-private partnerships in the Yucatan. Absolutely. But Reggie, first I wanted to, you wrote a book, and I just want to talk about your experience, maybe what opened your eyes in traveling with the president, some of the memories that you have that were kind of interesting of going to some of the places that you got to visit.
Yeah, well, I would say, one, thank you for having me, and this is an amazing group to be here with, and so many things that you guys have said have resonated with me and remind me of many parts of my journey. And to your point, Ambassador, I went to 62 countries with President Obama, and probably 90% of those visits started with some sort of visit to a cultural site, some sort of exchange of food. Actually, when we came here to Mexico, to Guadalajara, President Calderon spent 30 minutes explaining to President Obama how tequila is made in the region. And I think we even had some in the afternoon, which was very rare for him. But all that being said, the biggest thing that I've found out is there's no monopoly on good ideas. Good ideas exist all around the world. I think if we have the patience and the willingness to listen and to show up and to be genuinely curious, there are not many things we can't solve for. I think everyone kind of knows Barack Obama as a guy that was the president of the United States, but he started his journey in 100 counties in Iowa. Like, who even knew there were 100 counties in Iowa? He literally, every town he went to, in the morning I would go and I would find the local newspaper, and he would be able to tell you what high school played the night before, who the leading quarterback or scorer was in the town of Dubuque. It was just amazing the way he used soft power to build such a strong coalition in a country at the time people may have felt was very divided. And I think we've got to have resolve, because I think there's this concept that when we decide we want to change something, that ultimately somehow the thing that we want to change is saying that the thing that you're changing means the person before you did it wrong, or that they are fallible, right? And we all get things wrong, right? We get new information, we get educated, and it's okay for us to change our minds. It's okay for us to work to do things differently. I'm on the board of an organization called Organize. They just got a bill passed. It took 15 years, and it was an organ donation, the organ donation reform bill. And they've been working on it for 15 years. 15 years to get organ donation reform done. And I think about healthcare. People think that, the United States would have never gotten the Affordable Care Act passed. I think there were people in the administration at the time when I was there that didn't think it would happen. It took 40 years or so, but, it ultimately got done. And I think those are the things that we have to remind ourselves that if we show up, if we listen, if we're curious, and if we're resilient, we can find impactful solutions, and we can effectively price the risk.
So when you were playing basketball with the president, did you let him take a three-pointer, or did you just completely bat the ball away?
It depends on how the week was going,
So on another note, the NFL is quite popular, I believe, in Mexico, has a following here. Soccer is growing in the States. We have a way to go. Obviously, women's soccer has sort of been leading the way. Hockey is popular. By the way, the national sport of Canada is actually lacrosse, for anybody that has a lacrosse player in the family. So, but hockey is important. But I was wondering, Reggie, if you could share, I went to Georgetown where there were players from, we have other Hoyas here, I think, but where there were players from all over the world. Tell us about what sports can do both on a team in terms of helping people learn from each other, but also the use of sports as a way to promote cultural understanding.
Yeah, I would say that, look, you went to Georgetown, so John Thompson was the first coach to win first African-American coach to win a national championship. He went on to be essentially a civil rights leader and brought so many people through that organization. Dean Smith, even though I'm a Blue Devil, I often tell people, and people may not be familiar with, Dean Smith is a legendary coach, University of North Carolina, won less championships than Coach K, my coach, but did receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama because he was the first coach to bring an African-American player into the ACC. He found Charlie Scott, and that team went on to win a national championship. I think that sport is the ultimate unifier. I grew up in a household, my parents didn't make a lot of money. My dad worked for the federal government. My mom ran a salon. And I always found that, no matter where I went when I was playing basketball, it didn't really matter what your mom, what your dad did. All that mattered is how hard you played the game. If you played the game the right way, were you a good teammate? Did you play hard? And I think my favorite quote on gender and sexuality is, I remember I was out of school and someone asked Coach K about whether or not anyone on his team was gay. And he said, well, can they make open shots and defend?
Yeah.
Because if you can, it doesn't really matter what they do.
So Reggie, other than football or soccer, which of course is globally popular, basketball is spread phenomenally around the world. And why do you think basketball makes for? Is it because it's accessible and it only takes a certain number of players and infrastructure? It's obviously the thrill of the game, but it's had a phenomenal growth around the world.
Yeah, well, I think you got to give a lot of credit to rest his soul, David Stern, who was a former commissioner of the NBA. He had a true vision for making basketball a true global game. I think obviously not the size and scale of soccer, but I think to your point, of the American sports that are popular, basketball has the lowest barrier of entry, right? You don't even really need a hoop. All you need is a ball. Mm-hmm. I would say that the challenge in the U.S. is that in the university system, you have American football is so dominant because the consumption on television and the money. And then at universities, there's usually like 85 to 90 scholarships for football. Conversely, for basketball, you typically have somewhere between 9 and 10. So there's an incentive out there for people to play football over basketball. But I do think I just got back from Rwanda. The GM of the Raptors is a guy, Masai Ujiri. He grew up in Nigeria. He came to the University of Wyoming, played here. He was the first Nigerian descent general manager, and he's a general manager in Canada for the Raptors. He hosted a festival in Kigali with 250 kids from 16 countries in Africa to play hoops. And he's been running this organization for 20 years, and he's sent almost 250 kids to U.S. university to play basketball.
If he went from Nigeria to Wyoming, he's a true cultural diplomat. He can do
Right?
anything.
Everything.
I can't imagine
Food,
two more
temperature.
dramatically. So I'm gonna ask a question actually to the governor and to Rachel, sort of a same kind of question. Let me preface it. So governors are connecting now around the world on problems because you all, when you were mayor, the same thing. You're close to the problems. You have to get answers. You have to get solutions. Secretary Blinken, I had the honor of being out in Denver for the biennial summit of mayors and governors from the hemisphere, and it was terrific. And sustainability, obviously, climate, infrastructure, all these different things are critically important to get right. And I was wondering if you could comment on, number one is, what are some of the things you've learned or you've shared on in these international fora, like the one that you're working on climate or sustainability? And then I hope at the State Department, I know we have a new Office of Subnational, Nina Hishigian, we can continue to invest in that subnational governors, mayors getting together thread. And I was going to have your comment, but Governor first.
Yeah, I've been going to the COP, I think, for the last 4 years, and every COP has a lot of learning for us and to know people that are doing great things around the world. So, for example, we in Yucatan have mangroves, and we're now working with some companies in the United States and Canada, and we're going to be restoring 50,000 hectares of mangroves in Yucatan. So we're going to be having our blue bonds, carbon bonds, and that's something that is going to be great, and I think is one of the first projects like this in Mexico. Also, we were working with the government of the United States and with Ambassador Salazar very close with USAID, because in the Yucatan Peninsula we have the second largest reserve for forest. What we call the Selva Maya. So we have like $80 million from USAID. We're working with projects with the community, because if we want to preserve those forests, we need that the people from the community get involved, that they can do their lives, that they can have the benefits of living over there. And these kinds of things that we're going around the world to know people, to get their ideas, to get the projects that they're doing in other places, and of course also to sharing what we're doing is something that benefits a lot, because if we stay only in our state and we don't go out to the world and see what's happening and what other people is doing, we're going to be very limited in our view.
Really appreciate the question and completely agree with the governor in terms of the importance of the role of the states and the provinces. I mean, one of the things that is so unique about working the foreign policy relationship trilaterally with Canada, the United States, and Mexico is how integrated our border communities, as Patty knows well, already are on both sides of the border for us. And so I think, Ambassador, you rightly noted, the City Summit of the Americas that we launched with Secretary Blinken this year was a real recognition of the power of states and municipalities and the role that people play in the connections through exchanges that are really down at that level are really important. So I'm glad you mentioned the City Summit. because we have multiple different programs. One of them is the TIES program, which is a thematic exchange. In actuality, we did have a North America TIES program that came out of the city summit that was absolutely focused on climate issues and climate adaptation. So we have been really working hard in terms of the educational and cultural exchange piece of the department to, first of all, up the numbers. So that would be one of the biggest things I would say. We are very focused on the fact that there's a lot we can do through those mechanisms, but we really, in the North America space, need to get those exchanges up. Because of how important they are to understanding each other's cultures and to really that kind of North American way, to use the event's kind of logo. We've got a number of ways to do this. Another is YLI, which is our Young Leaders of the Americas initiative. Again, something we've been very focused on, including in the North America space. And there's some really great examples in the Canada and Mexico space. We have one alum of that program who's a Canadian who said it was transformative and life-changing because of the context she built in San Diego and that trilateral piece of it. We have another Mexican participant who is now working on sustainable farming and cattle ranching practices with hundreds and hundreds of cattle ranchers and farmers after her experience through the Young Leaders of the Americas initiative. So again, there's just a lot that we can really do, and incorporating the state level and the municipal level is really, really key to make sure that we can build those connections.
Yeah, and a lot of these leaders go on again to run their countries. So I wanted to just trigger a thought. We had some wonderful tequila last night, and we learned all about how it's made and the process. And I was thinking about Canada and food and culture and what I know about it. And I remember Dave Grohl filmed a commercial during the Super Bowl for Crown Royal where he said, here are all the things that you think were invented in America that were actually invented in Canada. And people learn more about Canada in that commercial than they ever did about anything else. But Candace and Patty, I wanted to ask you, you all have, could be successful in whatever you're doing, but you chose to keep expanding your horizons and not being comfortable and being global. And I was wondering if there are one or two pieces of advice that you got along the way, or mentor, something that you draw from to keep you going forward to help doing what you all do. Candace first.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think I'll lead with two stories, actually 3 stories.
Could you pull your mic just a tad closer? Yeah.
Absolutely.
There you
Is
go.
that better?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll start with 2021. And this is the first year that we ran the Academy. And just for context, this is the 3rd year that the Academy is in existence, the Black Diplomats Academy. And this year, our total number of graduates will be 75. So if you can imagine, 75 Black young people who had dreams of becoming diplomats, but had no pathways to get there, our Academy has opened that door through those experiential learning opportunities. And one young woman in particular, she came to us, just graduated from law school, passed her bar exam, was looking for articling opportunities, and couldn't find one. She was doing everything right, everything that you're told you're supposed to do when you graduate from school. You go, you get a good education, you follow the rules, you do everything, and everything will work out. Well, she did all that, and everything didn't work out. And so she came to the Academy, and she shared her story with me. And at the time, we were just starting our mentorship program. And one ambassador, she's a former ambassador now, Sabine Nolke, she is a weapons non-proliferation specialist. And actually, when I met her, I thought, oh my God, there are people like you that exist? What do you mean? What's that? But it's learning about what's in the space, who are the people resources that exist in this space. And I saw the opportunity to connect this young woman to the former ambassador, and she mentored her. They still stay in touch after, since 2021. And it was that network that this young woman, her name is Rochelle, that she was exposed to through the ambassador that actually gave her the opportunity to have her first internship at Global Affairs Canada. And today she's employed at Global Affairs Canada. So can we just give a round of applause for mentorship?
That's a great point, just to remind everybody that this, strengthening connections and soft power isn't just an external
Absolutely.
outside your country. It's also building your bench and bringing people into a global view.
Absolutely.
And especially in our country. Reggie I've got to get to Patty, but Reggie
Can
has
I
a
can I
quick
ask you
comment
a
on
question,
this.
Ambassador?
Yeah, you've got.
So, I'm sure you're familiar with the statistics in the U.S. in terms of the amount of Americans who have passports and have left the country. And I know a lot of these exchanges are focused on young people. But do you ever think about the idea, or what would you think about the idea of targeting older, more non-traditional individuals to come on exchanges?
I will answer that question. It's a great question. I've got a couple of answers on that. Let's hear Patty first on her inspiration, and then I'll try to answer that question.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think that is a fascinating question. I can't wait to hear what you'll say. No pressure. But I was going to say, in terms of lessons learned, I think that one thing that I can pass on that has really served me in my efforts and of my team well is to come at whatever you're doing with curiosity and an open mind. There's not one time that I haven't been in awe, kind of baffled about what I'm learning. To give you a quick example, I started Patty's Mexican Table because I wanted to break down myths and preconceptions about what people in the US thought about Mexicans and Mexicanness and Mexican culture and Mexican cuisine. And I wanted to show who we were to Americans. And I thought I knew so much about Mexico because I was a policy analyst, because I did actually, Governor Villa, for my thesis for ITAM, I did a thesis on the removal of governors since 1860 to 1994, and what were the causes that governors left. The removal.
All right, be careful over here.
Don't go anywhere.
We don't want to lose him. Or maybe he can take notes.
It was a study on the ways that the center has controlled governors and states, geopolitical power games. And I studied so much of Mexico and its history. I thought I knew so much, and I thought I knew so much about food. So I started Patty's Mexican Table wanting to share what I knew. As the seasons continued, I realized that I was learning so much myself, that I knew so little, and that who enjoys the most watching the show? Mexicans around the world. We don't know enough about each other. We don't know about our richness or diversity. And of course, it's a fascinating thing for non-Mexicans. But I just think if you come to things with an open mind and curiosity and optimism, they say there's people who see a glass half full and half empty. I tend to see it overflowing. Yeah. And it served me well because you don't do much research, you just go for it with enthusiasm and a lot of optimism. And curiosity, I think, is a really powerful tool because it allows you to understand the other better and to have empathy and to not come at it, at a conversation or relationship or venture with a preset mind, because we need to have categories and boxes to understand the world. It's a chaotic place, but we also need ways to unlock the doors.
And it's also
diplomacy is one.
You're
Food
exactly
is
right.
another.
The rhetoric today in our politics has not contributed to that. The dehumanizing of different people and the coarseness of our dialogue, and whether it's geography, learning about other cultures, traveling as a student, all that stuff is so vital. I wanted to get to Reggie's question. It's an interesting question. So first of all, America is getting older. The boomers are now senior citizens for the most part. Don't tell them that. They don't think they are. By the way, we wouldn't have the pickleball craze if it weren't for that demographic. But the good thing is they are traveling. They are, in fact, probably the largest segment of tourists and cultural tourists that exist. Now, the problem is a lot of people don't have access to those types of things. And I would say the richness of our country and food and diaspora communities give people in America at all ages the unique ability to kind of travel to a country. But, you could go to, you think of New Orleans as jazz and great food, which it is. They have a huge Vietnamese community, the shrimping community. You can go right outside of DC, also a big Vietnamese community. Ethiopian, the number of Ethiopian restaurants in Washington is staggering.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So you can do that in the U.S. The other thing that's sort of interesting, kind of on a hard power point, is we had a discussion with Senator Hagerty, Senator Cardin, two of our important senators in foreign affairs community, about why our capacity to do certain things in diplomacy is limited because we don't have enough people. So we talked about the idea of creating a reserve foreign service corps of retired foreign service officers who could come back in and process visas, and when there's a crisis like Afghanistan or something, there could be a cadre that could be called upon because they haven't lost their skills, they haven't lost their knowledge, they haven't lost
Uber for retired foreign service officers. This is great.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone should invest in that.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess in closing, just to maybe ask you all a question about U.S., Mexico, Canada. So yesterday, last year, one of my colleagues was here talking about what is the North American identity? What is it? Can you put a label on it? And then yesterday, there was one of our co-chairs from Canada, a business leader, said, actually, it's kind of nice that we like hockey, you like American football, and we like soccer. It keeps us different. So what is the avenue for closer ties between the three countries without having unrealistic expectations about, all of a sudden hockey is going to become the most popular sport in Mexico, without losing our identity? But what are those? Is it education? Is it business? Is it trade? What are those things? Culture, food?
I think will be people because, for example, we have around 10,000 American citizens living in Yucatan, but we're also having a lot of Canadian people that are going on winter to go to our winter. That is like your best summer ever in Canada. And we have 30 million Mexican people living in the United States. For example, in San Francisco, California, we have 80,000 people from Yucatan. If you go to any restaurant in San Francisco and you get to the cuisine and you say a Mayan word, 50% of the people are going to be aware of that. So I think business is a great opportunity with the trade and all the agreements that we have. And of course, nearshoring is a great opportunity also to have the jobs that we need in Mexico and to have the supplies that we need. So I think people is what connects us. We need to keep working in business. We need to get more education in our countries, and we need to share more our culture.
Rachel?
Thanks for the question.
You actually have all three countries in your portfolio.
I do, and I love it.
I know
It's
the
wonderful.
EUR Bureau had Canada for a while, but that was pre-independence.
That was a long time ago. It's a great question. And at the beginning of this panel, you talked about this, and the governor just talked about the importance of the private sector. So I really want to take a minute to talk about one of our premier initiatives and the fact that as we're discussing, these exchanges and the ability to make connections is critical to really building that understanding, particularly as we move forward in a world where we absolutely are each other's top trading partners, and we all in the business sector have common needs, and that includes a strong workforce to prepare us for essentially the economies of the future and what we're seeing in terms of cultural shifts and economic shifts. writ large, and as we address some of the more difficult issues in our hemisphere that include security and migration. So one of our premier tools for doing that is 100,000 Strong in the initiative, with the 100,000 Strong in the Americas initiative, where we are partnering with the private sector. Mexico has been an incredible leader in this, but this has really been a way to partner with the private sector to really push some of these exchanges. So I really want to note, we're looking at this right now in a North America context, and we are going to launch an initiative that's called the 100,000 Strong Klima Initiative that would be looking to partner with the private sector and educational institutions on exchanges that are really focused on climate and climate adaptation and mitigation and what we need to see in this space. So for me, I think when we think about what the governments are looking at, when we look at the North American Leaders Summit, our leaders and my Secretary of State is on the ground right now here having conversations on security and migration. As we look at how interconnected we are, and as we look toward the next North American Leaders Summit, educational exchanges and building those connections, as well as thinking about what our workforce development needs are, but also really celebrating the diversity of each of our citizens and using it as an asset and building on that is something that I think in this space is really critical and something that we should all be thinking about in terms of exchanges and cultural connections.
Thank you. Okay, speed round. Candace, Patty, Reggie.
Okay, so I think, Rachel, you were reading my notes as I was writing my notes.
So I hear people,
Yes.
and people.
Absolutely.
I might have some agreement here.
I think the majority for me lays around labor mobility and economic growth and the opportunities within those. So I'm thinking even as Rob talked about yesterday and Susan in their panel, when you consider the onset of Industry 4.0 and what that means for people, right? The needs around upskilling or reskilling for people transitioning from one type of job that is obsolete now to new jobs that are coming, that are emerging. I'm thinking about the North American way and how do we make sure that we're educating or providing the adequate or quality education to our workforce so that they're able to easily transition from one career type to the other, from one in-demand job to the next. And then also just thinking about our shared methodology around prosperity. What are the things that are truly meaningful for us as citizens in North America? And also the ability to just move from country to country, share our culture, the language, the music, the arts, the sports, all of that, and be able to participate in it as regular people.
Are we going to see a poutine enchilada?
Come on with the poutine, yes.
I was going to say that. Two quick things. One, I love the theme of the North American way because I think that we tend to think in two. Mexico, the US, Mexico. Mexico, the US, Mexico. Or Canada, the US, Canada. Mm-hmm. And when you think about us being three, mm-hmm. It is so liberating. Mm-hmm. It is less fixating. It is less love-hate obsession. There's more like openness for collaboration. When you think about three, it's like I have three boys. When I had two, they used to fight all the time. When I had my little Juju, all things got fixed. Thank you for the third. So I think
the power of three.
The power of three. So that's one thing. And the other thing that is counterintuitive that we don't think about is that in all these relationships, we tend to see the us versus them, mm-hmm. and there's this fear mm-hmm. about the other taking what's ours and transforming it. And I think that if we can tone down that fear, mm-hmm. there's purists, for example, that don't like the Cinco de Mayo celebration in the US. They get so upset because, in Mexico, we don't celebrate it. Well, guess what? It's the best train to hop on to celebrate Mexicanness. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with it? It's a great excuse to people want to eat tacos and margaritas. We can say there's these other hundreds of tacos. Have you tried, The same thing with Day of the Dead. It's like, don't touch Day of the Dead. And we know what happened when the 007 movie had that big parade in Mexico City. that didn't exist in Mexico City until that movie. And Mexico City said, what a great idea. And now we have a parade in Mexico City. So I think it's the losing the fear, not because you're trying things from the others and they're evolving in beautiful ways, does it mean that you lose your own thing? And food is a great metaphor. We can continue to pass down the heirlooms or treasures or DNA, the cochinita pibil, the barbacoa, the carne asada, oh my gosh, the food in Monterrey is so insane. I'm looking at pets. I had never been to Monterrey. It was like mind-boggling. We can continue to just harness the power of passing down those things we love, but we have to walk a parallel path of innovation and exploring and mixing. Mixing is not a bad thing.
I've got it, Patty. Maple syrup mole.
I want tacos and margaritas every day. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think the key words are just like it's opportunity and how those opportunities allow us to experience and access the cultures through in the region. And I think the things that are happening that are on the books, obviously sport is already doing it. You've got a World Cup coming up. You got an Olympic coming up. I think, the NBA is going to bring a team to Mexico City probably in the next 5 years. Obviously, the education exchanges, a couple people on this panel have gone both ways in how they have done secondary education. And then I think sort of the basic stuff like, jobs, whether they're temporary or permanent, healthcare, family, love, tourism. I think those things are going to continue to grow. And the more access and the more experiences that we have, I think they will continue to multiply.
I'm optimistic. So we need to give our audience a round of applause.